I'd start a series of Q&A sessions just so we could start getting around this project, the Incent project, so I could bring you up to speed with where we are and what it's all about. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of a dance now as I try and get to your questions and then give you some answers. It's 8 o'clock in the morning in Australia. It's a beautiful day, so I thought we'd, since I'm at home, I thought we'd come outside. First thing I'm going to do is just ask Carl whether he can hear me, and see how we go from there. Stand by. Cool. Okay, so Carl's telling me he's online. That's great. So let's go to the questions and see what we got. Okay, right. First thing you want to know, apparently, is about me. What can I tell you about Rob Wilson? So you may or may not be aware that I'm an ex-naval officer. So I joined the Royal Navy in 1988, and I spent about 24 years with the Navy. I was a seaman officer. I learned how to drive ships, control jets, and that culminated in two frontline commands of HMS Ledbury and HMS Somerset. The last one, so Ledbury is a mine hunter, and Somerset was a frigate. So Ledbury was about sort of 60 meters long, 50 guys under command, and HMS Somerset was a frigate, more like 190 people, there or thereabouts, and about sort of 120 meters long. I deployed both of those ships, brought them both out of refit, deployed them, and that was that. For reasons I won't bore you with now, I became disenchanted, not with the core job, but if you like, the jobs the missions we were being asked to perform. I won't say any more than that, but as I grew up and sort of got wise, I started to feel less and less comfortable with the sort of things that we were being asked to do. So I made the decision to step aside. I went out to the United States and got my sort of education sorted out with a master's in sort of strategy, and sort of made plans. I became interested in the financial markets, taught myself to manage money, registered with the CFTC and took their exams, and then for a period of about 2 years I had private client money under management, which I used to deploy in the foreign exchange markets. And then if you cast your mind back, there was a fairly cataclysmic event, I'm not referring to the GFC, after that in 2012 when a big hedge fund went down, and the name escapes me at the moment, but it was run by John Corzine. And John Corzine was the ex-governor of New Jersey, and his firm had taken a massive bet on Europe, which was looking really dodgy at that time. And his conviction was right, but his timing was out, and he had to keep servicing his wager, and he did so with customer money. Wow. I've got people joining the call here, guys, and you just got to keep your microphones. You've just got to keep your microphones muted, otherwise you'll screw this up. Okay, so let's hope that's better. Yeah, so Corzine got the bet wrong basically, and his timing was out, and he raided his customers' funds, and these customers' funds were all sitting in segregated accounts. Well, my client funds were sitting in segregated accounts also at Chase Manhattan, and I thought, okay, so I'm really interested to see what happens here. Well, the bottom line is nothing happened. Nothing happened to Corzine, nothing happened to his firm went down, but it took years to sort out. And in the meantime, I found myself in a moral dilemma. I was happy if I could control the risk, but I wasn't happy that if I couldn't. And so I shut it down. I shut it down and decided that I was going to do something different. Brought the family out to Australia to sort of start again, and that's where I got interested in Bitcoin. What did I do about that? Well, I took a fairly large stake out in Bitcoin, and that did in the very early part of 2013. And you'll know that by the end of 2013, beginning of 2014, that was doing extremely well, and we used that money to bootstrap BitScan. The idea of BitScan was my attempt really to do whatever I could to get Bitcoin mainstream. I wanted to connect merchants and consumers. And being a simple soul, it seemed to me that the best way of doing that was to set up a directory and make that directory as big and as comprehensive as we could and as easy to use as we could, and that would get that would help things on. Once the directory was built and out on mobile applications, we built on a marketplace so that those merchants could advertise and sell their stuff right through the directory, and nice and easy. And we learned a lot about the development process and the sort of tools that you need to become adept with to make that work well, because as soon as you operate anything at scale, your application layer needs to be really, really tight, and it needs to be built on a really solid foundation if you're to have if it's to work well for the consumer. And that's really where our experience has grown over the last 2 to 3 years, and we've become, we think, pretty expert in developing consumer-facing applications. All right, so that's a long-winded way of answering question 1. Let me just see what else is up. Okay, so there's a question here about how I got into crypto. Well, that's, I think I've gone there. There was I felt sort of compelled morally to change the way my life was tracking, and Bitcoin just came up at the right time. I saw the potential, and the rest is history. Okay, so let's just give you a brief intro into Incent itself. I told you how we developed BitScan. The bottom line with BitScan is we simply couldn't convince, or we still cannot convince, sufficient merchants to actually sell for Bitcoin to make that project a going concern as a business, which is why it's always been a free service. We started thinking about this about a year ago. How were we going to continue on our sort of a mission, which was to advanced mainstream adoption, if the merchant didn't want to play? And we could understand why. The customer base, the customer demand just wasn't there. We started thinking about how it would be if we could put, instead of asking the merchant to take digital currency, how would it be if we could get the merchant actually working as the distribution mechanism for that currency, literally putting it in the consumer's hand? And how would we do that? Well, the solution that we came up with was that we had to find a solution or a problem for the merchant that crypto could solve. And that's when we started looking at the loyalty industry. I don't know how much you guys know about the loyalty industry, but it's pretty broken. And the reason for that is that it's never had the possibility of using digital currency. And so the only thing it does, the only thing it can do, which is to allow firms to issue points or credits or funny money tokens, really, that only has utility if it is spent back with them. Now that creates several problems. On the merchant side, it means that from the moment you issue a token, a point, or a credit, there is a liability that you will have to honour that moving forward. It's a recordable tax burden, which means that the merchant, if he issues $1 million worth of tokens and they're live in the market and he could be called on to settle those, then they have to be recorded on his balance sheet. And that in first world countries has tax implications. And that is why you find your points, tokens, or credits expiring just when you're about to use them. It's because they have to be very, very closely managed and taken off the books at tax reporting times. So we could see there was from the merchant side there were costs of administration and an administrative burden which was possible to exploit. Then we looked at it from the consumer perspective. You only have to go as far as your partner's wallet, or indeed your own. You'll see it's stuffed full with cards that you thought were a great idea at the time, but they just sat there and done nothing ever since. That seemed to us to be a huge amount of value left on the table, and we wanted to understand why that was. And as we sort of got in deeper and deeper into this subject, what we saw was that loyalty is all about something called the loyalty margin. Loyalty works really well when the marginal cost of delivery to the merchant is relatively low and the marginal value to the consumer is relatively high. You get this lovely differential, and that differential is a lot what allows the merchant to actually pay for the admin and all the rest of it that goes with it. So loyalty started with air miles, and they're still the most successful scheme on the market. And the reason for that is that aeroplane has to fly, right? So it's in the merchant's interest to actually fill up his seats, whereas for the consumer it's highly valued, right? So you've got this lovely differential where the merchant is the marginal cost or the marginal unit cost is relatively low, but for the consumer the value is relatively high, and that's why air miles, people care about their air miles. When you talk about retail, it's a very different story. If someone offers you 5% off something, you value that as 5% off, and yet they still got to cover their administrative burden, their tax burden, all the rest of it. So let's consider that now in terms of crypto. If you deploy a cryptographic token into the loyalty market, you can give the consumer far more. And you won't need convincing about that. You understand innately that a crypto is money good. It can be transferred, it can be converted, it can be spent across a far broader piece. So it's worth way more to the consumer than a point would be, or a token. So far as the merchant's concerned, it gets really interesting because their costs go down. Yes, they might have to sacrifice a little bit of margin as they sell, but remember that that one, it's configurable, for their business or for their product. Secondly, they immediately reduce their tax liability rather than increasing it. And thirdly, they can entice the consumer to come right back to them with that digital money, and then they zero their cost completely. So the cost situation for the merchant is potentially really good. And then also, because they would be delivering that digital value to a wallet application which the customer is motivated to open, they can also then establish a permanent digital connection with their consumer through that wallet application and push market whatever they want to that consumer down the way. And in an era where people are getting really sort of app fatigued, it's a very powerful mechanism to have your application embedded in a utility that your consumers are motivated to open. So once we understood that, we realized that if we could develop such a token, a very simple token, but if we and the ecosystem surrounding it, we would have a huge potential market to exploit. But secondly, and from a more sort of grand strategic perspective, we'd be in a situation where we would be creating a merchant-backed mechanism of actually distributing digital currency to the mainstream, literally, with merchants as our distribution channel. I hope that makes sense. I sort of ramble on a bit there. Okay. Wait for me, 46, getting old. This is an interesting one. Okay, so the question is, where will Incent be domiciled and what will the regulatory implications be? Okay, so Incent will be offered by Bitscan, which is a PTY limited company in Australia. To facilitate our international banking, we have a subsidiary in Hong Kong, which allows us to bank with HSBC in Hong Kong, and that's an international banking facility. So that's how that works. But the point about regulation and compliance is huge. We have to be and will be absolutely white hat. So we are joining an organisation called the Australian Digital Currency Commerce Association, and they've developed internationally if you like, a checklist of best practice, which we will have to comply with to be a member of the ADDC or ADCA, as they like to call themselves. We are currently working with compliance lawyers in Sydney, and it's absolutely clear that we will need to be a registered cash transmitter before we can start doing business. So we will comply with the most stringent compliance regulations, because for the business to work, it has to be credible with merchant clients. Okay, and they don't mess around, and nor should they have to. So compliance is very high on our list, and just to establish the Australian dollar bill for that process is at least $100,000. Okay, it is not cheap, but that's the cost of entry, and we are more than willing to pay that in order to exploit this opportunity. Sorry, I'm just looking down here to see what's coming up. Okay, so this next question speaks to the process, how we actually going to operate the program at a sort of in terms of money mechanics. It's a good question, and I'm going to take my time here because it's really important that we understand this. In order that the consumer really gets the most value out of this product and sees its potential, it needs absolutely to be as instant as we can make it. That's one of the reasons we're so keen to partner with Waves, because you'll be aware that proof of stake blockchains can achieve far greater transaction confirmation times. However, what we don't have time to do is, at the point of sale, go out to the market, buy Incent with Bitcoin, for example, and deliver to the consumer. It needs to happen instantly, and the way we will do that is we will hold Incent on reserve so that we can make the customer whole instantly. So what I'm after here is that, say for example, a consumer buys something either online or at a bricks and mortar merchant, they literally pay their money, and the very next thing that happens is that they get, their phone goes bzz, and they've got a lovely little message on there saying, hey, listen, we've just rewarded you for your business, and follow this link, and here's your wallet, and bang, 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 bang. In the meantime, the merchant is settling with Bitscan after the fact, right? So he's probably not sending until the next business day to make Bitscan whole on that Incent. And also, in the process of actually issuing Incent from our own reserve, we've just increased the overall circulation of Incent, and the underlying secondary market hasn't felt any benefit. And that needs to change. So at the end of a transaction cycle, let's call it sort of 1 unit day, we need to go out to market and rebalance the market. So we'll buy Incent to take it out of circulation to the tune of all the Incent that we've issued, and we do that with Bitcoin.
And then when the money from the merchants eventually reach Bitscan's bank account in Hong Kong, we then buy back the buy back Bitcoin. So what's happened there is circulation, our reserve has gone down and circulation has gone up during the transaction day. In the following day, we buy back that Incent from the market. That replenishes our reserve and allows the market, the underlying secondary market, to feel that demand impulse in an economic way for us. And then finally, when merchant money settles to Bitscan's bank account, we can buy back the Bitcoin and rebalance our Bitcoin reserve. And there's obviously a time lag there. And that is why we need a reserve of Incent over and above what we're selling during the ICO. It's absolutely critical because this is the only way we can sort of assure liquidity to meet that commercial aim of instant gratification for the consumer, the beautiful demand impulse on the market for Incent after the fact, and then rebalancing it all out. I hope that sort of that makes sense. I've tried to explain that in some detail in the Bitcoin talk and on the site, but it's not that is the brokerage service that we need to perform to make this work commercially, and it's not something we can afford to play games with. It also allows us to limit our sort of risk with respect to Waze, which at the end of the day is an emerging technology. If I were going out to the market on the back of every single consumer traction, we would only need one big merchant player to risk, breaking all sorts of things. And when the wheels came off there, it would be ugly. If we do business the way I'm describing, that allows us to control that, and deal with any problems that arrive in a measured way. It also gives us the utility to carry out that settlement and rebalancing function on another platform should it become necessary, and that from a risk point of view is a really clever way of working. We do not, and you would not wish us to be in a situation where we only ever have one option, and that option being Waze, because if there's any problems there down the way, or indeed if there's any delay in implementation, then you would be wearing that, and we would be wearing that risk with nowhere to go. And if the product is live at that point, that would be devastating. So that is the detail on the money mechanics, and I hope it sort of makes sense. Okay. So what have we got? Okay, so there's a question here about how the tokens will be the Incent reserve and be secured. And very simple. It has to be secured in cold storage, and our math is telling us that we will need about 10% in a hot wallet. But look, that's something that we just have to wait and see. It depends how how customer one is looking and how we build that up. But there's obviously going to be a fraction that is exposed at any one time, both of Incent and of Bitcoin, and the rest will obviously it can be cold. And the whole point about this, I think, is that you're starting to see now that the money management operation is a key aspect of this product. It's something we have to take real seriously, and one of our first hires will be a quantitative analyst who does that and does nothing else, to make sure that this little ecosystem of ours is maintains its integrity and works. It just has to work. Okay. Boom, boom. Okay, so there's a question here now about I've got someone's mic on there, guys. No, that's better. Okay, so on the subject of a question here on business development. Oh, hang on, I just need to mute out somebody here. No. Okay. Well, look, I'm hoping that that is still loud and clear for you. Can someone just ping me on Slack to make sure it is? So there's a question about. All good. Okay. So there's a question about business development. Okay. So it won't be lost on you that this project will, live or die by our ability to create business customers, and not we don't. I mean, the beauty of this is we don't need to achieve that relatively quickly. This isn't a shrink wrap, bang it out on all sorts of sub-site type situation and wait, and they will come. This is a high touch activity as we ferret out relationships with merchants one at a time. We've been working this this challenge for about 3 months now. I have business development being triggered by a very, very bright lady called Jo Sawicki, who I'm sure you can Google should you so wish. Jo set up one of the first medical specialist medical channels when television in the UK deregulated in the 80s. She's a very successful entrepreneur in her own right. She now works at the strategic layer of commerce, helping people connect, making deals happen. And Jo's focus is UK and the US, and already she is unearthing contacts there and getting us into the room with some some pretty serious players. And specifically, we have one large multi-channel network operation in the US who are looking to move from a brokerage type business where they connect influencers to brands and sort of hope to a business that is tech centric, where they are the ecosystem and they host the ecosystem, and they love the idea of using a digital currency to actually bind their brands and their content creators together into a sort of a workable whole and sort of make that happen. Another outfit in the US do the same sort of thing, but they're content aggregators, and their demographic is millennial. They are really keen to push digital currency into that group as incentivization, and they particularly like the idea that consumers will be able to automatically redivert loyalty value straight into charities, and it's worth sort of underlining the fact that in that instance you can offer the providing or the issuing merchant with a further tax break because of that activity. So that's of interest to both them really and me. I think that's that has legs. Now, back in Australia, the development effort has been equally successful. Really, that's led by me personally. Really, just in the last week, just to give you another example, we're dealing with a large insurance company, insurance brokerage in Australia, who deal with animal insurance. Now, what they want to do again is build an ecosystem that binds the insurance to the vets, to the retailers, to the drug companies, to create barriers of entry, sort of preserve their hegemony. And you don't need me to. You can see that a digital currency that actually works within that ecosystem is of huge potential value to them, and we're just trying to sort out at the moment, what that looks like. At the lower end of it's unfair to say the lower end, at the smaller scale end of the market, there's a couple of wholesalers in UK that we've been in discussion with, and they both see a huge potential in the ability to actually either deal cross-border with loyalty on a B2B perspective, and also to offer their trader, their trade customers, effectively cash in hand as a reward for doing business with them, which is, it sounds, I don't want that to sound dodgy, but it's not something I would have thought of. What the point they're making is that their tradesmen are used to, operating a cash business, and that they will see the value of digital currency in the same way, if only it can be presented to them as an enticement for their business. Imagine you're, for example, you're running a landscaping business, and your spend on raw materials is £1,000 a month. Well, if you're getting £100 back for that, for example, or £200 back for that spend, that's giving you a huge edge, and it's obviously cash in your pocket rather than in the bank, and you'll understand the implications of that. So that's where BD is at the moment. Clearly we can't consummate these relationships until we have a product. So I wanted, before I've even looked at what the next question might be, to tell you exactly where the product is. In terms of the e-commerce product, it's built. It just needs clutching in to a digital token, right, or two ways. So that the connection between the application and the infrastructure layer is what needs to happen there, and that's that. And that includes the ability for a consumer to part pay with their digital value and from their bank account, which is a neat little bit of tech, and it's really it's really seamless. It's great, and you can see how that might work with Waves or any number of digital currencies. It doesn't just need to be Incent, of course. So that's where that sits. What hasn't been done at the moment is development of the mobile wallet to Waves piece, and that work is scheduled to commence in November. And finally, the area that we haven't explored yet until we secure bricks and mortar custom is point of sale. How does a returning consumer actually register their phone, and how does that work? Well, that's, as you're well aware, near field, and there's many technologies that currently exist that would help us achieve that. It's not something we regard as technically significant. So that's kind of where we are at the moment. Okay. So, Carl, if I could just have you feed back to me how we're going at the moment, that'd be really helpful. Connection good, super. Okay, so yeah, I've got a question here from. Okay, so this is talking about escrow. So let's talk about the ICO itself. If you've been to the site, you'll have seen that as is becoming the norm, where we are offering early bird discounts to people that that see the potential and want to maximise the opportunity. But yes, we absolutely are very keen to sort of demonstrate trust and commitment to the project, and so we will be establishing, in fact we are currently establishing, an escrow arrangement with 3 counterparties: myself, the CEO of Brave New Coin, and the CEO of Bitpanda. And the way that will work is the way it should work, which is where a portion of funds are released as we achieve milestones on the way. And the 3 milestones that I'm shaping to go firm on are the first milestone being successful distribution of Incent completion. So ICO complete, Incent distributed. At that point, 50% of funds raised to be released. I think the next milestone should be when, if you like, technical infrastructure between our application layer and the infrastructure layer with Waves, or is secure, achieved, and demonstrable. and that should equate to a further 25% funds released. And finally, I think the last milestone should be demonstration that we have a commercial client up and running with the product, and that will release the final 25% of funds. So to recap, escrow, absolutely. The counterparties, on a 2 or 3 basis will be, I very much hope, CEO of Brave New Coin and CEO of Bitpanda, and myself. And the milestones are, 3, 50% on the distribution of the token, 25% on making that connection between the application and the infrastructure layer, and finally a commercial product in the market. All right. Okay, so look, guys, I'm just going to check through one more time, but yeah. Okay, guys, I'm out of questions now. So since there are no more coming through, we've been on air now for, I don't know, what do we got here? Nearly 40 minutes. You've probably had enough for the time being, so I'm going to drop the call, and I hope that's been useful to you. I will be back on Wednesday, Wednesday evening for me. So if you want to catch up again there, then please, I'm only too happy. I hope I've made a reasonable fist at describing what we're about. But if there's things I've missed here, either now or after the fact, you've got 2 minutes to flash a question across, or I'm going to wrap it and get on with Sunday. Okay, that's all good. Cheers all.